let's stay on the task at hand here, and discuss various matters, like, not scoring points. There's no points scored, dude. This is like unders were 10-2 last week. No points are being scored, and we've seen I know remember when the Rams and Chiefs played on that Monday Night Football game when Jared Goff was on the Rams and
shootout.
But it was like literally every smart football writer, like Kevin Clark, who's my boy, wrote something about it. The Wall Street Journal has. I think he was in the Ringer. Every site was like, "Welcome to the new era of football. Star Wars has changed our lives, and football will be an explosive." It's like, okay, there are gonna be some good offenses, but there's been good offenses for 20 years. The Rams were awesome in the early 2000s, and it hasn't really panned out that way. If anything, I think we've seen the migration of some teams saying we can't be explosive, and we're going to go to ground and pound. But we've seen the last 2 years, unders have been hitting at a shockingly high rate, the highest rate over the last 15 to 20 years, and 21.7 points per game this season. That's weak sauce, Brady.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of reasons why I think we could, chalk up some of the lack of offensive firepower and scoring and all of that. I mean, you could touch on some of the narratives. Hey, we've gone through an era where there's no more Tom Brady, there's no more Peyton Manning, there's no more Drew Brees, there's no more these Aaron Rodgers isn't playing this year, right? He could probably help some of those numbers. We've moved on from a phase of Hall of Fame quarterbacks who are playing for such a long period of time. That's one potential explanation for it. I mean, outside of Patrick Mahomes, who else would you say as a starting quarterback right now is a bona fide Hall of Famer?
That's a good question.
Matthew Stafford, but I mean, it's not guaranteed.
But no, and that's where we'll see, right? And so you kind of leave that question out there and see how people absorb it. I think there's guys who are on their way, but there's questions, right, about where the quarterback position is at. I have always felt, and Leger, this is what I'd like to kind of throw it to you, is there has been for a long time now, and it's twofold. It's lack of offensive linemen and the way offensive linemen are being coached. I think that directly plays a result in all of this because of so many things. The spread offense, we're talking about junior high school level, 7-on-7 being more prominent than actual tackle football at a lot of youth levels. That's had its effect and impact trickling up. And so I think offensive line play, because of the cut down off seasons and cut down hitting and all that, has also suffered due to that, and which has obviously played a role in offensive production, both running the football and protecting the quarterback, obviously in the passing game. So, Leger, do you see that sort of thing? Because I know I see it and feel when I go watch high school games, when I go watch college games now.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Brady. Me and Harry were actually just talking about that in the rundown because I always put little notes in there. I know, Brenton, you see them from time to time. And literally, that was my first point, regression of offensive line. That was my number one point, Brady. And to your point, I don't think it's being coached up as well as it used to be. We see teams that usually have success in the past of the NFL. It was built right through the trenches, right? And now with offensive line play, it's literally people are literally scouring the streets trying to find offensive linemen, where before, Brady, it's always hard to find a good offensive lineman, but you could find them. You know what I'm saying? But now that's not the case because guys, whether it's they're not being coached up right in high school and college level like you, I watch a lot of college football, college football. There's just not a precipice on it as far as, the technique behind it because, like you said, there's so many spread offenses and quarterbacks getting the ball out of their hands so quick. The actual technique of run blocking and then also angles and specific things you need to have success on offense, I don't feel like that's being coached up right. So I think that's a reason why, to your point, Will, we have seen a regression in points, and there aren't a lot of teams scoring, 27 and 30 points a game. Also, I think execution on offense, Brady, you talked about this. Guys don't hit as much, right? So, during training camp, it's a lot different when you're going through walkthroughs and things and practice than when those actual live bullets are flying during real games, right? That's why we always see offenses kind of start slow when the season begins because a lot of coaches don't even want to put their players in harm's way during training camp. But, Brady, when we were playing, there was a callus that was needed to be, built up for you to have that success during the regular season. And now coaches are so scared to lose somebody that instead of guys getting hurt, in training camp, they're getting hurt week 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're having extended injuries. So I think that plays a major part of it, the injuries, the lack of callus building up with the less hitting. And then also I think the regression of O-line as far as it being coached properly, that is a major factor why teams are not having as much success on offense.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and throw in a couple other things. I think schematically too, you're seeing more teams not just play straight man, they're match zones when they play them, in part because the game's gotten more spread out. And when the game gets more spread out and you've got more 3 wide receiver sets on the field, in order to combat that, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you've got guys who are isolated out in space in man-to-man coverage sometimes where they can eventually be schemed up to, win or create space to create bigger plays. And we've seen a lot softer coverage. We've seen them more probably drop 8, forcing quarterbacks to have to be patient and have to actually read what the coverage is. So there's some scheme to it as well. I mean, I would say this too, RPO, the run pass option, that's so prevalent in college football. You can't really do it at the NFL level. And it's a big adjustment, I think, for quarterbacks who now can't solely look at one defender to get a read on what they're going to do with the football, either handing it off or pulling it and throwing it. And in part because of, again, 3 yards downfield in college level for ineligible. In the NFL, it's 1. And it's much more strictly enforced too. So you've got all these things that add up, the soft coverage, the rules, and all that. And I also think how quarterbacks are being taught is very, very different than how it was when I was growing up playing more under center. 60 plus 65% of the snaps are now taken from shotgun. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can't win and play with rhythm and things like that at the quarterback spot from shotgun, but I grew up, and went to Notre Dame and was playing in a West Coast offense where you had a 3, 5, 7-step drop and different things off of that. And the reason why that's important because you had a sense of timing and rhythm so you could throw with anticipation within that. And you just don't see that anymore. That's something that you always hear as a plus for a quarterback coming to the NFL level is, hey, he throws with anticipation. And you bring it up when you're analyzing college quarterbacks because you're like, yeah, not many dudes do it anymore because it's not a part of the offense. Whereas when you're under center, you knew on 3, your foot hit the ground, man, that ball was coming out. There's no hitching, there's nothing else. When you knew there were certain plays, by my 5th step, I know I'm throwing to my first read or not. And as I hitch up, I'm going to 2. The next hitch is 3, 4. All 3 are drops. Same thing with a 7-step drop. But by when I get to my 7th step, I know whether or not I'm throwing to the first reading the progression. So there's all these things that I think over the course of time, because of the style of offense that we're running, going back into shock and all these things, it's taken away from some of the precision, some of the anticipation that the game used to be played by. And I think the stat that stands out the most to me is the red zone in particular. When you look at the red zone offensive efficiency, it's been coming down now for 4 years since 2020, averaging about 3.2 yards per play, about 50% efficiency. It's now down to about 45, 46, about 2.8 yards per play. So you got a spread out offense that's not running the football as effectively. And then down in a short, condensed portion of the field, quarterbacks aren't playing with as much timing and rhythm and anticipating windows like they have to down in that portion of the field. So I think you're starting to see a number of these things display themselves so far this year. And by the way, not playing the preseason probably plays a little bit of a result.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting topic, and it's like we were talking about Brady and I just texted briefly about the quarterbacks from like 2016. You don't like sorting by touchdown leaders. It's Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, 1 MVP, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady at number 7, and you get to like Derek Carr at 8, Jameis Winston at 9, and you still have Carson Palmer, Eli Manning, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, rookie Dak Prescott, right, and rookie Jared Goff, rookie Carson Wentz, and additionally Russell Wilson, who was still playing at a really high level at that point in time. You had like Andy Dalton and Ryan Tannehill were mid or whatever. So there's definitely that drop off. I sort of wonder, like, what do you guys think? Is the nature of college football and how teams run their offenses and the wider hash marks and all that? Is it like a self-fulfilling prophecy for the quarterbacks and the offensive linemen?
It's not that. It's not that. Like this is to me, and this is one of the things where if you want to get into situational awareness and clock management, game management, it's this. They look to
Exactly.
the sideline for everything. Like,
Yeah.
they're not being taught now when they get
Correct.
onto the field to have situational awareness of what it should be and to watch the
You're saying in college the guys
in
aren't because they're looking at
college,
because they're looking at the
because you're looking at the sideline. And look, I've had a coach tell me the justification for it. He comes like, "Hey man, let me tell you something. I got a really nice house.
yeah.
I remember he told a
Comes with
story.
a really
He did tell-
expensive
yeah,
mortgage,
yeah.
right? Like that whole conversation, you sit there and go, well, yeah, I get it. I don't understand the justification, but this isn't helping this young man when he gets in the NFL.
Correct.
When that's what he's supposed to be
Well,
tasked with.
that's sort of what I mean. I'm saying, like, one, you have these coaches in college, like, dude, if you don't win within a couple of years, in most places, you're gone. So you're not going to be like, hey, like, you're not there to like mold some young quarterback into becoming a great NFL signal caller who's prepared for this high level pro style passing game. Most guys are like, all right, my system runs like this. I'm calling plays like this. And I mean, even I feel like Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, who, is old school pro style as it gets, right? I mean, they're still throwing up the cards with like Notre Dame's definitely got a card with your face on it, Brady, right?
To me, that's the disconnect right now in college football and the NFL. Brady, like when we were in school, like your job as a coach was to teach these kids up, right? To empower them. I don't know if that's being done. To your point, Brady, these college coaches are scared now because college has always been a big business, but more so now, right? Like you said, Will, you don't win in 3 years, like they're ready to get rid of you now. It depends on what your contract looks like, because guys like Jimbo Fisher and Mario Cristobal, they're not going anywhere. So to me, that's an excuse, right? Because if you have a deal where you're going to be there minimum 6-7 years, your job is to empower your quarterback or players on your team, period, right? And then also teach them so they can do it themselves. Like, you don't need to coddle and hold their hands, because like Brady said, like when they get to the league, like that's on you. That's not on the coach. You don't look to the sideline and be like, coach, should I check out of this? No, you have to do that. So I think there's been a disconnect. And you talked about the RPO, right? We kind of saw a shift in the NFL where, like last year, it was big, but now, refs are calling it tight, Brady. Like literally, there's an offensive lineman 2 yards down the field, they're throwing the flag, where before Philadelphia was killing teams with the RPO. I mean, the Miami Dolphins killing teams with the RPO, and you don't see it as much this year. And I think, and like I said, Brady, that was a great point that you brought up. I think it's because refs are calling it so tight that the last thing you want to do is put yourself behind the 8 ball and get a 5-yard penalty. Now you're looking at first and 15 instead of looking at second and 3.
It's funny, I think we always attribute like the RPO to a dual threat quarterback. And I remember Peyton was doing stuff like that back in Denver. Yep. They weren't saying it to anyone, but that's what they were doing. They would be down the red zone and inside the 15, inside the 10. They'd be looking at a defender. He'd be pulling that thing out and slinging that thing if it wasn't there instead of handing it off. So, these are things that, and Rodgers done it. Brett Favre.
Well, but the RPO isn't like the run pass option for the quarterback all the time. Is the quarterback going to hand off and run or pass?
And RPO.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a linebacker. Option. It doesn't have to be an edge play. It's just a run play. And there is a pass option off. Right. That's all it is. And by the way, the offensive line's blocking run because that ball may be handed off. There's no doubt, right? So
that's why you get those ineligible man downfield, because it's the guy, they're run blocking, and the quarterback pulls and then throws.
On the ball too long. Yep. Which is one of the reasons why, like, really when you look at who was most successful with it, people hate when I mention the name, but Chip Kelly. When Chip Kelly did it, and you had guys like Sam Bradford ball out, Nick Foles ball out, they were running a lot more outside zone. And that outside zone kind of pulled everyone. And you could hold it because they're all running to the sidelines. And so you were able to have enough time to read that second level defender before a guy got 2 yards downfield. So,
your boy Sam Hartman at Wake Forest, they did that like extended.
That's a different. It's called a slow RPO and a little different, and that's more so the safeties. Basically, the wide receivers get up on the safeties, right? It forces those guys who are 10 yards deep. Now they have to sit flat-footed, and you got a wide receivers running full speed right by them, which that works at the college level. Until you play a team with a defensive line that just busts through and charges the mesh point, now it doesn't matter. But I think there's a lot of things you can attribute to. I just, it's early in the season. Not playing preseason games where you can iron some of these things out probably has a little bit to do with it. But it's been tough to watch, and we've also are in an era where it's as I would say easy on the offense as ever before. I mean, defensive holding. Defensive pass interference, the way wide receivers are considered defenseless in the act of catching. So as far as throwing across the middle, like it has gotten as easy as it's ever been for offenses to move the football. And we don't see that the scoring right now. We're not seeing it quite as much.